Welcome to the Simply Real Life podcast. I'm Sarah, the founder of Simply Real Health, here to help you simplify, amplify, and elevate your life. This show is for those of you who want the real talk on how to live a more intuitive and intentional life, a life that's healthy from the inside out, and one that feels more effortless, aligned, simple, and more alive. We cover it all, from health, wellness, mindset, motherhood, daily habits and rituals, to business and relationships, creativity and growth, and tiny tricks to feeling your best, and the energetics behind it all filled with personal stories, unfiltered conversations, and of course, answering all of your burning questions, all in the way of simplicity and keeping it real, so that you can create your own version of your healthiest life. Let's do it. Hi guys, welcome back to the show this week. I am so glad that you are here and tuning in, and I am so glad to be here too. This is such a bright spot in my week, getting to honestly just sit down and complete a full thought and think through these questions that come in a bit more intentionally of like, how did I do that? Or how did I think about that? Or how did I navigate that? And it's always so wild to me, like how many people we have the same kind of things going on. It's something that I love the most about the people in the Simply Real Health community is that we can bounce from topic to topic. Like my DMs are never just one thing. It is always questions coming in that are full spectrum. There's so many different topics and so many different things, all of which I love talking about, which is part of the reason why I love doing this show, is being able to answer questions. The limits that Instagram stories places on me feels really confining sometimes, especially when some of these answers are so much deeper, or there's different layers. Like we could go from home design and about kids' clothes and about my favorite clothes, or things that I'm finding, or things that are just making me feel happy, or things that I am intentionally choosing in my life to build around and going after a certain feeling in my life. But also we talk about food, we talk about mindset and motherhood and business. It's like all of these things are so interconnected into designing this life that is intentional and healthy and feels really good to us. I feel like the comparisons in what's going on as a community, and I can always pick up different trends and notice different things going on. And this question is such a reflection of that. And it also caught me a little bit by surprise, because it must be from one of you who is definitely an OG follower, because this question goes way back, like 15 years ago, to something that I struggled with health-wise that I honestly haven't given much thought about it at all, because I'm healed from it. I don't think about it. It's not a part of my daily life anymore. But this was such a good reminder of, I think, how similar sometimes the things that we go through are, and how sometimes we can't always tell what's going on behind the scenes. And even in a community of very intentionally living and very health-minded women, that there are sometimes these different themes and patterns that I've noticed, specifically with health conditions or things that happen with our health that we're sort of trying to figure out, that they usually fall in like one of three categories. And one is digestive, second is hormonal, and third is metabolic. So today's question that we're going to be getting into today is in that third bucket of metabolic and stuff about the thyroid. So those are like the three things also in my life that I have healed from or have gone through phases of feeling confused by. And even though you are a very healthy person, that oftentimes these things happen. And of course, there are things that we can do physically and tangibly to help our bodies heal. But underneath the surface, there is always a layer to it, I have found, that is energetic and emotional and related to our nervous system. That's the stuff that you will not oftentimes find when you're going to a doctor, even a naturopath. They're looking at specifically the physical symptoms and what is maybe depleted in your body or what's going on in your body, and trying to fix that from a strategic standpoint. But there's also this secondary layer, which is why I know you all ask these questions, is that you've probably been doing the physical stuff, but maybe not seeing the results or not seeing the healing that you want. And you have this little intuition hit that it might be something more, other layers you can look at and address when it comes to healing the body, because it really is all connected. There's obvious things that we can address, and then there's always these underlying things. So the question that came in this week is about one of these topics that has deeply impacted my own life. And it's a story that I have not told in a while because I feel like I have moved past it and I just don't think about it anymore because I am healed and happy and, feeling great. But I do think there are some really good lessons and some tips in here around healing anything that is feeling a little bit more mysterious. So the question that came in was, can you talk a little bit more about why you went gluten-free? And the specific question was about how to heal hypothyroidism. And so for me, this is my story, that I went gluten-free because I had hypothyroidism that came on. This is like 15 years ago, so a long time ago, came out of nowhere, or what I thought was nowhere. And looking back now, I can much more clearly see all the factors that were going on in my life at the time that all added up to this very chaotic feeling time in my life where there was stress, a lot of it internal, to be honest, a tumultuous time in figuring out who I was and what I wanted to do with my life. And was the relationship that I was in the right one, and feeling a little bit off about that and not sure what to do because they looked great on paper, but it just didn't feel right. I was in my mid-20s and it was a time where there was a lot going on. But in the moment, I did not know that. I did not recognize that. I wouldn't have told you at that time that it was a stressful point in my life. But I think the gift of time, you can look back and see, oh, wow, there was a lot of things, even just energetically, that were going on, that were being created, that were being manifested. Signs being given to me that something was the right fit or not the right fit. It was right before I started my business. So it was a lot of internal talk with myself around, am I good enough to do this? This is what I really want to do. Will anybody be interested in this? All the self-doubt. And also your mid-20s, there's just a lot of factors at play, figuring out who you are and what you want and the moves that you're going to make in life. And it was a very stressful time, but again, not a stressful time that I would have told you was stress. So I think there is a huge difference here between stress that we feel and can acknowledge and say, yeah, I am under a lot of stress. Oftentimes what I find with very high achieving, driven women is that we can actually handle so much. When going through my day-to-day life, I did not feel stressed because my capacity was pretty high. I also have a positive attitude and never got to the point where it felt like too much to handle. But my body, my sweet nervous system, my emotional body, my energetic body, my body has a much lower threshold than my mind. And I find that after going through, 3 different health things over the course of years, the first was hypothyroidism, the second was PCOS, and then SIBO. So you can see digestive, hormonal, and metabolic. So I have had experience in all 3 of these categories for sure. And I think there's also a reason that I experienced all 3 of those things to really help me understand this connection between our minds and our emotional or energetic body and our nervous system, and how the 2 are so deeply wired, but that we can perform and check off the things on our list and keep going forward and stuffing it down and ignoring and never really dealing with emotions or feelings or how our bodies may be stressed. But like our minds say, just keep going. This is how you achieve. This is how you perform. This is the way to be successful in life. And I think a lot of that mentality, like that's why I want to do this episode, is that I just see this over and over as a pattern of like eldest daughter syndrome. Anyone who has been raised in a generation where it was all about performing the same as men. This is what it takes to be successful and to be driven and to, put aside your body and your intuition, especially your emotions, and just power through most things in your life. And I feel like it has been just a giant unlearning. All 3 of these healing conditions that I've needed to go through have been these kind of up-leveling processes for me to understand the deep connection, I think, between the 2. And a lot of unlearning that had to happen, a lot of changes and work in my mindset and how I was wired and what I deemed as the right way to do things, whatever it may be. So looking back now, I had this very stressful time. And then what usually happens after a very stressful time, even if you're not aware that it's stressful or not, is that after that time, whether it be 3 months down the road, 6 months down the road, or even a full year later, that your body goes through that trauma or that stress. And there can be things that happen that are dysfunctional or dysregulated. And it's oftentimes this delayed reaction to a very stressful time in life. this can happen with grief. This can happen with big transitions in life, big changes, even just mentally that you are going through and weighing out and trying to navigate your way through. So looking back now, I have the gift of seeing that in hindsight, that yes, it was definitely one of those times. So it's no wonder that my body did something sort of funky because I wasn't listening to my body. I kept powering through, staying up late. I was fueled on coffee. I was having wine at night. I was snacking through all different emotions, even though it was all real food at the time. There was an emotional, energetic layer that I was definitely not aware of and not tapping into. So I had hypothyroidism come out of nowhere. And how I knew that is that I felt like I was eating the same, which was relatively healthy, aside from the coffee and wine and desserts here and there, but putting a lot of effort and time into eating real food and eating pretty clean. And I all of a sudden just started gaining weight. I was not doing anything different. My workouts were the same. My food was the same. And within, I think, 5 or 6 weeks, I was up 15 pounds, just something totally wild and weird. And I was tired all the time, but I couldn't sleep well. My hair was starting to fall out. I was cold, where it took me a while to piece things together. Something is going on here. So I went to go see a naturopath and did some blood work testing, and sure enough came back that I was in the category of hypothyroidism, which is slow. There's also hyperthyroidism, where you get fast heartbeats and a little bit more of the anxiety, but I had the slow kind. So knowing that, my first thought and instinct was like, okay, I want to do what I can with food and with supplements. So what can I do? And I remember being loaded up with all these different herbs and vitamins from the naturopath. And I did that and it didn't work. And I was feeling horrible. You can imagine, for me, especially, the food is my life, and wanting to be healthy and wanting to feel good in my skin. I'm putting in all the effort, doing all the things aside from addressing my emotional, energetic stuff and my nervous system, but doing all the right things from the outside in, and being so frustrated and confused, like why it was not working, why my body all of a sudden it felt like the enemy, that it was against me, just out of control. And it was a month of that. And then I went back to the doctor. This is not working. She said, okay, then let's try a desiccated pig thyroid, which is the natural next step of what you can do. Tried that. It did not work. It did not help. Long story short, after 2 or 3 months, again, I'm like feeling horrible and I just don't feel like myself at all, and really low energy and fatigued, and trying to, put this together while working full time and all these other things going on in life. And I went back and ended up seeing an endocrinologist, and they ended up prescribing medication to help with the thyroid. And I went on the medication because it was just sort of a last resort. And I was like, whatever I have to do, I guess my body's out of whack. I wish somebody would help me walk through why this is happening, like getting to the root reason, instead of just wanting to take a medication and then the answer was to be on that for the rest of my life. And I just did not want that. I did not feel great about that. My intuition was screaming at me about that. Like, this is not right. This is not it. There has to be a reason why this is happening. Like, let's get to the core reason. And which is usually why I started with a naturopath and a functional medicine doctor, is that they are more likely to want to help you get to the reason behind it and help you fix it at the root, instead of just saying, here, take this. Not that I'm against medication. It has saved my life and my health many times, especially throughout the last decade, that I'm not against it. But if that's the long-term strategy, that is something to me that never felt right. I'm like, I want to know why it's happening and like get things fixed at the root of the issue. So I had a contact of somebody who had seen a different functional doctor who was kind of like way out there, didn't really have a practice, but he saw special cases. And I had worked my way in there trying to see if I could just get some help as a last resort. Like, maybe this guy knew something else. And so I remember going in to his office and doing the exam, and he looked at the back of my arms and he said, well, you know what? I have a feeling it might be gluten. And I said, what? I don't really eat that much of it. Really, I eat really healthy. If I do have gluten, it's sourdough, or it's really old world bread, like baguette bread, where it's flour, water, salt, or it's sprouted grain bread, like Ezekiel bread. And he's like, it doesn't matter if your body is reacting to it. And he told me something that really changed my life. He said, there's some interesting studies coming out that there's a molecule in gluten that when your body is under stress or has been through a stressful time, that signals can get crossed. And there is the molecule in gluten that actually looks very similar to the thyroid molecule. And so your thyroid can then start attacking almost like an autoimmune response. And it doesn't actually matter the amount of gluten you're eating. Like any amount of it can trigger this reaction in your body because it's done on a cellular level. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I will try anything. Sounds a little overwhelming. Remember, this is 15 years ago where there was nowhere near as many options as there are today. Now it feels so easy. You can find a gluten-free swap for almost anything you want. And I don't feel like I'm missing out on life. But back then it felt like this is a thing I'm going to take on. I'm going to try. And he said it could be gluten or it could be dairy. And so for most people that would be overwhelming. He's like, but I understand for you, you know real food, you know how to cook. Like this may be something that you can handle and navigate. And that is how I felt. So I was like, you know what? Let's just try. He's like, pick one first. If you want, do an experiment. The tricky thing is it's not going to be like a 1 or 2 week thing. Your body takes about 2 to 3 months to clear out any gluten or dairy molecule. And so I think I started with dairy for the first couple weeks. And I'm like, I just don't think that this is it. I seem to be like okay with it in small amounts because I was already very well versed in real food and knew the versions of it that are much easier on your body to digest versus the ones that are not so much, and had a really good sense of what felt good in my body. So I then transitioned into trying gluten. I took it out completely. And there were so many things that I was thinking that I wasn't really eating a lot of it. But of course, I'm like, well, there was real pizza crust that I loved, like going out to the pizza restaurant right around the corner from my house at the time, like wood-fired pizza, fresh as can be. Definitely a real food. But I'm like, oh, I actually maybe do that once a week. It's not nothing. There are things that add up. Things like soy sauce and Worcestershire sauce in a Caesar salad, or things that were hidden that I didn't really know about. And so I went through this process for 2 or 3 months. And of course, it felt hard in the beginning because you're really trying to change your brain. Like there are so many things that are hardwired where we automatically do things. We like to buy the same exact things at the grocery store. And to be shaken out of that routine feels really hard, especially in the first 2 or 3 weeks as you're grappling with real life things. Like, how do I go out to eat? What places can I go to grab something quick? What do I get at restaurants? What things do I need to be aware of? What things do I need to look for? What brands of snacks are available to me? And the thing I think that helped me the most, and what I tell anybody going through this transition or needing to experiment with some food, is that you can see it 2 ways. You can see it out of abundance and like, wow, look at how many options there are. Or you could go through it with scarcity and lack of like, these are all the things I can't have. I can't do this. This is such an issue. This is such a problem. There's nothing I can eat versus I can find something to eat anywhere. I can find gluten-free anywhere. And that is still very much my mentality, no matter where we go, where we travel, what we're doing, going out to eat. You will never hear me at a restaurant or when people are picking a restaurant say, oh, well, they don't have anything for me to eat. They do. There is always something that you can eat. And what you focus on is what manifests itself. That's what grows. Mentality and mindset, it's everything. It really is everything of how you experience your life. So taking that mindset of abundance and let's try and see, and I'm learning something new and I'm trying different things and I'm testing things out and this is fun and it's an adventure and wow, I'm learning so much. Within 2 to 3 weeks, I started feeling better, like feeling better. I went back to the endocrinologist and I said, I really would like to get off of this. I'm doing an experiment with my food. They did not recommend that. They were not happy that I was going to do something not medicated, of course, but I said, how do I titrate off of this and do that slowly? If that's my choice, then they, told me what to do with that and came off medication completely within, I want to say 2 months. By then I was feeling pretty good with going gluten-free. And within 2 to 3 weeks, I felt better. Within 2 to 3 months, I was like a different person, not on medication. My body felt back to normal. I lost all that extra weight. My energy was back. My hair wasn't falling out. I wasn't freezing cold in the summer. So many things started to correct itself. And looking back on that now, I'm like, wow, what an easy fix that was. Yes, it took a little effort. Yes, it took a little time, but to feel so much better and to feel like my body was strong again and doing the things that it was supposed to do and that it wasn't fighting against me was game changing. So now I always tell the women, I am obviously not a medical doctor. You can go ahead and look up all the studies on this, but the correlation between going gluten-free and helping with your thyroid is insane. I have had, I want to say probably 30 to 40 women over the last 10 years, all of which have struggled with either hyper or hypothyroidism, that have then committed to going gluten-free because of my story. And their lives have been changed. They are no longer on medication. And for some, a very few handful of them, it was less gluten and more dairy. But for the most part, I would say 90% of it was going gluten-free. And so I have not looked back. I do not feel deprived. These days, there are so many options. It's such a normal thing now to be gluten-free. And secretly, or not so secretly, but one of the things I love about it is that it just cuts out so much crap. It cuts out so much crap of random snack foods that are not nutrient dense. They're not helping your body. You eat them because they're there or because your kids are eating them. They're just filler food that don't actually do anything. And they're more like the stuff you go for when it's emotionally based eating. And it just cuts out so much noise and so much clutter. If I want to have a treat or something or pasta, fine, great. I just get a gluten-free version, or we make it at home, and it's a non-issue. And I think that's actually such a blessing in my life that I do have to plan ahead, think ahead, do things like stop at a store when we're traveling, or maybe take a quick peek at the menu before I go somewhere. So I get a game plan in my mind, because having all of the options available for you all the time is not a helpful thing for our brains. But having some sort of limits or some sort of guardrails are really helpful for our brains to be like, okay, let's limit the spectrum here. And I would say for me, going gluten-free has had that secondary effect of it just cuts out so much extra crap and just feels easier in that way. Since then, and doing the research on gluten, it definitely is a highly inflammatory food, and it didn't used to be. Doing much more old world forms of it is obviously the best way to go, even if you're not gluten-free, but less of the processed stuff and more of old world grains. If you can get grains that are imported from Italy or France or any country in Europe, you are probably going to digest it so much easier and so much better than the wheat and the grains that are available in the US. And that's just the sad state of things, but that is true. I know a lot of people who maybe didn't even have hypothyroidism or issues going on with their thyroid, but they have inflammatory issues like knee problems, hip problems, back problems, just achy, feeling lethargic, feeling sluggish. There's so much to be said about bringing your inflammation down, and I think reducing or getting rid of most of the gluten, unless it's very well sourced, can be such a helpful thing, I think, for most people. And there's just so many options these days. To wrap it up, that is my story. I obviously cannot give medical advice, but there are now so many studies and so many pieces of research out that are connecting these two things of thyroid and gluten. And then even just gluten with autoimmune conditions in general, causing more inflammation and inflammatory responses in the body. And to me, food is medicine. Your body is constantly healing and always moving in the direction of health and wanting to be the healthiest it can. And sometimes we get in the way by the stuff that we're feeding our bodies, and just going along with what's quickest and easiest instead of thinking of like, what do our bodies actually need? And the way that our bodies have been genetically designed. Like, we are designed to digest real food and the more old world forms of those foods. So grains in whole grain form versus so much of the processed like bread, crackers, cookies that we see today. If you have any sort of inflammatory condition going on, or you have any mysterious stuff going on with your health, that it can't hurt. And yes, it takes a little bit of time. No, it's not an overnight fix. You will not see a difference in like 2 or 3 days or even a week. But maybe after 2 or 3 weeks, you might start feeling hints of like, oh yeah, I am noticing, okay, I'm feeling better. Just taking down that overall inflammatory load, I think, can be so helpful for a lot of different things health-wise. So just wanted to share my story. It's been something that has changed my life. It has been something that has changed my family's life, the way that we cook, the way that we eat. It's the reason why both of my cookbooks and the cooking club is entirely gluten-free, because I think even if you still eat it, you can source those and just add them, to a meal or do them more intentionally. But for the most part, eating real foods that are more naturally gluten-free is going to be a great way to be feeling really good for the long term. So that is the full story. And the reason why this podcast is so helpful, because that is almost impossible to explain in a Instagram story slide for a question and answer. But I hope that this inspires you to be thinking about things in your own life, and not just the physical stuff of, there's the physical part, there's also the mental, the emotional, the mindset, the energetic body, the nervous system, right? Where I can look back and see like, yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on there. No wonder why that triggered some sort of dysregulation in my body a few months later. And knowing that makes it so much easier, I think, going forward when you are walking through times that are hard or stressful, or there's just more going on, that you are taking care of your internal state, that you are doing things that are actively helping you process emotions, feel emotions, let them out, talking to someone, having people support you, like really being able to walk through it without stuffing down, without ignoring, without just trying to power through, because it always comes back later to bite you in some way. That's like just not a sustainable way to live a healthy life. It does require slowing down. It does require being aware of our emotions and our thoughts. And I think it's really important. And it's something that for me, I have started incorporating in my daily life, some sort of nervous system grounding, nervous system regulation practice, because I know that if I don't do that, it builds up and then festers into these much bigger things that require these months and years of healing that I don't have time for. So I hope that this was helpful to hear and encouraging. And if you have any questions at all, feel free to come find me over at Simply Real Health on Instagram, and happy to chat more about anything you would like on this topic. I love you guys. I hope you have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you back here next week.
If you enjoyed this episode and want more like it, make sure you're subscribed to the Simply Real Life podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, and maybe share it with a friend or two. That would mean the world.